So without that further ado, I'm going to start this panel. And let's give a round of applause to our panelists for coming early from different states to be here with us. And so what I'll do, I'll just go down the row. And if you could introduce your name, what you do, and one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Campagna. I actually work with Chantel here at LinkedIn, and I am a sales manager here. I have two different roles. I came in externally from American Express about 4.5 years ago, and I was a manager on the mid-market enterprise team for our talent solutions business. And then recently, about a year ago, I moved over to key accounts. So those are basically our largest US-based partnerships that we have across the United States. My team handles the East Coast. We have a similar team in Chicago and another one on the West Coast as well. And then I'm also in charge of being the business liaison for diversity, inclusion, and belonging efforts. So basically, there are diversity teams. How do I get those the sales organization to buy into all the work that the diversity teams are working on? And Chantel and I met because we launched a mentorship pod here in New York for new Black and Latina and Latino employees to help them thrive their first year at LinkedIn.
A round of applause. Thank you. Adrian?
Blount, and I'm an account manager at Unilever. On the international side, my territories are Dubai, Middle Eastern, oil and gas, duty-free. Those are my customer base, and I help create a leadership development institution for high school students, 11th and 12th graders, to help them see what it's like in corporate America. So we give them a taste of coming into Unilever. They meet with directors, they meet with managers, and it just shows them what their next path could be. So we try to set them up for success.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sherilyn Castleman. I am currently a sales trainer and leadership trainer. I have my own business currently. I've had it for a little over, on and off most of my life. But right now I'm doing this full time for about the last year. I have been in sales my entire life, although I was a social worker in sales when I started, but I have been in sales my entire life, primarily in life science and healthcare. So I sold in my clients for Anthem, United Healthcare, Merck, GSK, and primarily SaaS and PaaS companies. I met Chantel at Twitter, where they had the most incredible selling event, and I was in a room with over 100 African American sellers, and I have to say that was the first time in my life I've not been the only person of color in the room as a seller. I was telling somebody I know what it's like to get on a plane with 12 white males and go off to a client. And so I've always been the only person in the room. I've been training Pinterest sellers. I am the only person in the room when I'm training Pinterest sellers. I'm training Twitter sellers. A lot of times I am the only person in the room training Twitter sellers. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you're like me, you kind of, I don't want to say stumble into sales, but one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden you've been in sales for 10 years. So if that's your story, then it's not rare. It happens to a lot of us. But I'd like to hear from the panel, and anyone can start, and feel free to have a dialogue about it. But what made you get into sales?
I'm definitely a people person.
Yeah.
So my undergrad is in accounting, and my mother was a CPA, so I said, let me go into accounting. I love numbers. Hated it. Literally hated it. But when you have this degree that you're sitting on, I went to payroll doing account reconciliations. I went into finance. I even did a little bit of marketing, and then I became a pricing analyst in the department that I'm working in, which is Unilever International. And I just went to my director. I was like, I want to change. I want to sell. He said, okay, here's an account. And I did it. I was just amazing. Not to give myself kudos, but I'm giving myself kudos.
You should give yourself kudos.
So from there, he ended up giving me like a very big account. And I got a mentor, and she's amazing. And she's just helping me climb up the corporate ladder. She says, look, I'm going to be retiring in 3 years. You got to be ready. So I said, okay, I'm going to be ready. Yeah, but sales is truly my passion, and I like to share it, so that's my story.
My first sales job was selling Girl Scout cookies door to door. I was 11. I was one of the top Girl Scout salespeople in Denver, and I loved it. My dad had his own business. I started working with him when I was in grade school, but I went to college and studied social work. And I came out, and I was a social worker. I worked with women in color, of color who were had committed manslaughter against a child, and very intense. And we were struggling to get funding. And I had to sell to United Way to get funding, and which I did. And we were able to fund the program. And I was like, wow, if I'm going to be successful in nonprofit, I need to build my sales skills. So I left the nonprofit world and I got a job selling life insurance door to door. And very quickly, I was top of the leaderboard. And great, I enjoyed it. But anybody who knows anything about debit selling, you're selling something where you're going by each week and you're picking up 50 cents or $1 from somebody. Do you know what the commission is on $1? Okay, so I read and I realize that it takes the same effort to sell somebody a life insurance policy where they're going to pay $1 a week as it does to sell $1 million life insurance policy. So I joined American Express, joined their global team, and it ended up in Europe selling financial services and selling estate planning and securities. When I came back to the States, I sold for a nonprofit hospital. I sold for Colorado State University, where I was director of marketing and business development. And then when I got my MBA, I joined a couple healthcare PaaS and SaaS companies, and I've sold into life science and healthcare as a sales manager, as an individual contributor, as head of client services, as a client services manager, as head of client services and business development. Until very recently, I was working for a company where, again, as the only one, and doing what a lot of us do, not claiming my accomplishments, I got cut out of my commission. Not claiming my accomplishments, I got cut out of my promotion. And I was listening to Tyler Perry, and he said, power is in owning your own business. And I stepped away from it and started my own business. And so that's kind of how I got into sales.
So for me, a similar story starting young. I was a latchkey kid. Both my parents worked in teaching and social work. So I would come home from school and had a lot of idle time. And I actually, in the back of comic books back in the day, you can win all these prizes if you sell greeting cards. And I literally ordered a book of greeting cards. My parents had no idea, and we lived in a high rise, and I would go through the high rise selling greeting cards. And I won them. I was able to purchase a microscope and a chemistry set as a result. And my parents had literally no idea about any of this, because this is why my son has aftercare now and is not running around wild. So that was the first job. And then for years, honestly, I think in my younger years, a lot of stuff happened. I think being the only one kind of socially that intimidated me to the point where I was just shy. I was quiet. I was not riding the sideline. I spent most of my 20s not doing anything in sales, mostly because I didn't think I could. Went back to school, got my MBA, and a couple of years into Amex, I was in a marketing role. And in that marketing role, I had to sell marketing to client managers' clients. And I loved it. And my leader was just like, why aren't you doing this? And I had all these excuses. She's like, I'm going to call bullshit on you. I think you're full of it. You should go for the job. And I did. And I ended up selling into restaurant accounts for American Express, then moved into other hospitality, so hotels and different travel partnerships. And that was the start. And honestly, if it wasn't for the woman kind of calling me on it and saying, okay, my boss told me to do it, I should better apply. And that was literally the changing point. The roles at American Express were a little bit different. They were business development, marketing, sales roles, so more of a hybrid role. Was displaced there as part of a big reorg and said, this is my opportunity to try something else. And luckily, an ex-Amex employee worked at LinkedIn. So he was actually my MBA intern when he was in school. And so he helped me navigate LinkedIn, and I was able to sell my experience. And interestingly enough, LinkedIn took a chance on me because I had never led a quota-carrying team before, but I had led. And they cared more about my leadership skills than they did about necessarily the skills of how to teach someone to sell, which they thought they could teach me. And I started here 4.5 years ago, sales leader.
I have a quick follow-up on that. How were you able to translate like your previous skills into a management or leadership position? I don't know how many of you in the room want to be a manager, but sometimes that shift from IC to manager can be really difficult and tricky to maneuver.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I became a manager at American Express, and then I had to translate it here. So I'll answer that in two parts. I think part of it is really about understanding what your manager needs to be successful. I think often in sales, it's very easy to be focused on you and your number and what you need to do because that's your job. And I think often, even here, the people that report to me sometimes don't think about what I need to look good in my job, what I need to manage up the chain, and what my leader needs, and all the way up. So I think part of it is having those conversations to understand, like, how can I make you look successful for the leader, and then you start demonstrating those skills. And I think for any job, and I'm sure most people here have heard this, you have to be acting the part before you actually get the role. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a piece of that. I think the other piece is, how are you inspiring those around you? We all get bad news. Like sometimes like your quota goes up and people weren't expecting it, or you lose a big account, or all of a sudden there's change and people don't like change. How are you the person leading your peers and helping your manager so that at the ground you're helping inspire? All of a sudden people are like, wow, that's somebody who can then inspire in a different way later. So I think looking for leadership in even small ways, it doesn't have to be formal. I think people default to like, oh, I have a mentee and therefore I'm a leader, and that's absolutely important, but I think there are lots and lots of other ways to do it, and just to pause for a moment and look around and say, how can I help the people around me? How can I move us all towards a positive outcome, and how can I help those around me be better or get out of a funky place that they may be in? I think there's all ways to translate those skills.
Yeah. I think truly being a positive person on the sales floor or on the sales team will show your manager that you're someone that can be steadfast throughout change, because we all know these quotas are not getting less. They're going up. No, it's good. It's good. So I actually want to double down on your education. So I'm sure everyone has those thoughts about masters or not masters, higher education. What's the payout? Is it worth it? Everyone on this panel has a master's/MBA in some capacity. So I'd like anyone to just jump in. Can you tell us about why you decided to pursue that? Has it paid out for you? And what doors has it opened for you?
So I worked for a hospital, and I ran a $600,000 cost center, which means we would cost the hospital $600,000. After 3 years, I was running a $3.5 million profit center, all from driving sales globally that I had initiated. And I all of a sudden had to do a budget. And if anybody was a major in social work, you know how many finance and econ classes. I couldn't read an income statement. I couldn't write a balance sheet. I had no idea how to do that. So I went back and got an MBA strictly to have financial fluency. It was one of the best things I ever did. If you don't get an MBA, take finance courses. You have to be able, if you want to sell into the C-suite, if you want to be a sales manager, if you want to be an account leadership, you have to understand the numbers. Business is about financial fluency and business acumen. And that's why I went back. I sat through all the other business classes, and I sat there going, yeah, okay. But seriously, and so I was like, marketing, yeah, I got that. Leadership, yeah, I got that. I've read every book they ever wrote. I'm a voracious reader. I read everything. But the finance class, the econ classes, they kicked my tail, but that's why I went back and got my MBA. And it absolutely, I used to fight with the CFO. He used to call me an idiot every year. I mean, I was. He would say, go do your budget. And I would look at him and then say, I had no idea even how to do one. So for me, it gave me, it brought the playing field. It brought me up to everybody else. I can sit in a room now and have a conversation with the CFO. I can sit in a room and have a conversation with because they're going to talk about it now. And I want to say that a lot of times we think this doesn't happen. When I was training at Pinterest, I was going around the room and asking, and one of the young generation sellers in the room said, nobody cares about EBITDA. EBITDA is bullshit. And he was selling into the Ford C. Ford was his client, and he was helping them launch. And I said, ooh, ouch. You got to learn that EBITDA is not bullshit. So I'm going to say, if you don't get an MBA, take finance, let you understand that.
Thanks.
And there is a difference because I have a master's. I'm now currently in school for an MBA. First class was finance, which kicked my butt, but well worth it because now I could read the P&L, and you need to know your P&L for your business.
Can you explain
So,
a P&L to the room?
so it's like your profit and losses. It's like a income statement about your business. So what's driving your business? So I could look at my P&L, see where I am down, what I need to build it up. Where I work, it's pricing is like key because when you're selling into the Middle Eastern territories or oil and gas, the driver is price. So I need to know like how much could I charge them in order really to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't read my P&L, and when I go to my finance team to say, look, I need this price for this tea, and it's going to give me like $30 million, I'm going to sell 100,000 cases, and I need to know what I'm talking about because he may come back and say, well, that's not good. So reading your P&L and knowing that part of your business is so important. So I have a master's, but I think an MBA carries more weight because it's going to give you the financial literacy that you need to succeed in selling anything. So.
Yeah, just real quickly, the Motley Fool says that your client's 10K is the most important document you will never read. If you have never read your client's 10K, you have to read it. If you don't know what a 10K is, find out. If you don't know how to read one, find out. In some of my workshops, I spent 2 days teaching sellers how to read a proxy statement, how to read a 10K, how to understand a 10K is a financial, it's an annual report, but it's not the glossy one. It's about 100 pages long, and it tells you everything you ever want to know about your client. You want to be promoted, you want to be upgraded, sit in a room with your leader, be able to talk about what's in your client's 10K, and they will sit up and pay attention. It takes you to a different level. So read your client's proxy statement, which talks about how they're compensated. Read your client's 10K, talks about all their goals, all their pain, and all their financials.
So pretty similar. I was a psychology undergrad, and unless you get a PhD, you make absolutely no money being a psychology undergrad. So I started off as an HR assistant, and right. So I was like an HR assistant, and then I was a comp assistant, and I was in roles that I knew I was more intelligent than I was in, making less money than I thought I should make, and it hit me when friends of mine were graduating college, and I was 27, and they were making more money than I was already. And then people don't just give you a job if you tell them, no, I know I could be doing it up here, right? So I went to go back to school to basically jump me to where I needed to be so I could take care of myself. At the time I was single, I'm like, I may always be single, and I can't live on macaroni and cheese and ramen and all the things I was eating, totally frank. So I went back for that. I think it exactly what these ladies said in terms of like credibility, understanding how to read a financial statement. You then also become the liaison in the room. If you have a marketing person and a finance person, they can't speak the same language. You become the person that facilitates that, which I think is incredibly valuable. And I also think I apply what I learned in everything. So if I'm interviewing for a job, I do a SWOT analysis, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats on myself. Why would they hire me? Why wouldn't they? And then I figure out how do I help them get over anything they perceive as negative, or so to speak. I do it with my clients. I use the strategic thinking in every aspect of my life, not just what I do day to day. And I think it just gives you a framework. So for me, I don't know if I was more intelligent coming out, but I think I had a framework for business, a language I could speak that gave me credibility. And then the other piece is people look at your LinkedIn profile. It doesn't hurt to show that you're someone who's looking to learn, you're someone who's always looking to grow. And those credentials, I think, do matter to some people. So outside of what you get out of it for yourself, I think it does help the outside world perceive you in a positive way.
Thank you. So just to switch gears for a little bit, I'm really curious about work-life balance, specifically for you, Adrian, because you're internationally selling. So how do you fold that in with your family? What is a day in the life like? How often are you traveling? Just tell us more about that.
Now I'm not traveling as much as I used to, but I do still travel. Thank goodness my kids are grown now. But I'm getting ready to get married, and he has a little one. So the dynamics is changing all over again because, now I have to be mommy to a young girl all over again. So it it could be a little bit challenging. But I remember when my children were younger and they were in every sport, I would really ask my network. I feel everybody needs to have a village. So you need to say, my kid is playing basketball today. I'm traveling. I can't be there. You better be there for them. So I felt like that was important. And I think it's also important that, because I have two grown daughters and they're successful in their careers. One's a principal already at the age of 30, and the other one, she works for WeWork and she's a HR manager. They need to see me, succeeding, growing. So when I say, okay, I got to travel. So now they have the opportunity. I'm getting ready to go to Germany. I was like, I'm going to Germany. You want to come?
Yeah.
So they could come. I could be working and they could look around and do things. But I think it's really important to set the precedence because you don't know when that opportunity is going to come again. So I've always been the type that when it's knocking, I have to answer it. But I'm a firm believer in, especially if you have young children, your village is important. It really is. Whether it's your husband, your mother, your grandmother, your friends, so it's important. But traveling is wonderful. I think everyone should have the opportunity to see the world. So.
Follow up on that. Did you experience any cultural differences?
Oh my God, yes.
When, especially selling into Middle Eastern countries or
Yes,
Dubai or where
yes,
it's different.
yeah,
It's so
yeah.
different when you get there. So can you talk
Because
about that?
yeah, I had to make sure that they accept me as a woman and a black woman. I mean, a lot of times you feel like Middle Eastern, they're just as dark as I am, and a lot of times they don't look at me the same and they don't value me not just as a black woman but as a woman. Period. So I I'm very bold and I just have to be very direct, especially when I'm selling to them and they try to sideswipe me saying, "No, you told me it was going to be this price." I'm like, no, I did not, I didn't. But they try to belittle me because I'm a woman. But then on the other hand, like when I was working in France, it's like sometimes I would say like just what I need, and they'll like, "You're so disrespectful. I didn't realize you need to do a salutation before and after. You need to say hello, and you need to say sincerely or regards at the end." So culture is like so important, and especially in the Middle East because they just finished with Ramadan. So you have to respect their culture. A lot of times they may not respect yours. You make them respect yours, but when you're selling to them, you need to respect their culture and understand and have empathy. So that's it.
Thanks.
Yeah, like Adrian, I have sold globally. I've lived in Germany and Belgium for about 8 years. I lived in Guatemala for a year. Um, and I would say three things. One is prioritize. You can have anything, you just can't have it all at the same time. So what I would do is I would do a report card with my daughters twice a year, and I would ask them, how is mommy rating on this, and how important is it to you? My kids could care less if I cooked. I never cooked. It wasn't important to them. For my youngest, it was important that I go to her cello concerts. I made every cello concert. My girls could care less if I went to a field trip. So what I did is I would ask them, how am I doing and how important is this? And if it was important to them, I did it. I would come in from work and sit on the floor. If you sit on the floor with your kids, they will sit on your lap. They will crawl on your lap. When they are 16, they will put their head on your lap and talk to you about their boys' friends. And so prioritize. And then the second one is competency. There's a difference between competency and perfection. And as women, we tend to try to be perfect. We try to please people. You can't please people. You can't be perfect. You can't be perfect and have work-life balance. But you can be competent. And what I mean by competent is be more right than wrong. Okay? Get more things right than you get wrong. And so prioritize, competence, and the other one is caring. Figure out what's important and care about it. Love your kids, love your family, whatever is important to you, care about it, care about your job, care about your company. And what I challenge people is that if you criticize people, it raises their defensiveness. If you challenge people, it raises their game. So challenge your boss, challenge your company, it raises their game. So competency, prioritize, and caring is what I did. Like Adrienne, my kids traveled all over the world with me. It was one of the things I invested in. I would either take a babysitter or hire a babysitter when I got there. My kids have always traveled with me. Both of them travel internationally and have traveled internationally with their jobs. I wouldn't have changed it for anything in the world. And why I chose to live in foreign countries is I lived in an international dorm, and my friends in the international dorm got up in the morning, put their jeans on, and fought with their parents just like I did. And when I realized that people around the world are just like I am, I chose to raise my kids in lots of different countries and lots of different cities for that reason.
I wanted to ask you, Lisa, because all of these jobs sound amazing, being able to open up your own company, travel internationally. I'm sure there are folks in the room that are still kind of getting to that point where maybe we don't have family yet and you're still kind of honing on your career. How can you start that process now? How can you raise your hand and tell your manager you want more responsibility, you want to get to the management level, like to your point, what you were saying earlier, but how do you set yourself up for success right now?
So I think it's aligning way ahead of when you actually think it's going to happen. So I don't know if every one company has this. Here at LinkedIn, we have something that's called a career performance profile. And it basically shows what you need to be doing in your role to be considered like meeting expectations, so to speak. And I've used that something similar in the past to go to my leader and say, tell me what more I could be doing. Tell me what you would need to see for me to be an advocate for me if a role opened up in this group that I'm interested in going for. And I always think you have to ask questions that aren't like, hey, you're doing fine. I think it's very, very easy, me included, if someone's like, how am I doing? You're like, fine. And then I don't have to give tough feedback, right? No one likes giving it. Make it really, really easy to understand the objections. Even if it's like, if someone was to ask you what my biggest area of opportunity is, and I was going for this role, what would you say? And force them to give you answers, because without that constructive feedback, you're not actually going to know what's happening in the room when you're not there. You're not going to know the conversation that's going on. And often, leaders are tagging like who they think will be the next person to backfill them way before they're looking for a job. So part of my job is to know who my backfill is. And if I want to get promoted, before I can get promoted, my leader is going to say to me, who's going to take your job? So I need to be cultivating people around me for that. In order for me to do that, I need to be able to have those honest conversations. So I think a lot of it is clarity. Every manager, like you would think, like I'd say 80% of it's standard and 20% of it is who you work for and what they value. And having the conversation, understand that nuance is really important, because there's what's on the paper as your job, and then there's what your manager's interpretation of what that actually looks like. So for me, it's just having those conversations. I think outside of that, it's networking like crazy and bringing something to the table before you need to call somebody to be an advocate for you. So if there is a VP of another department and you think someday you need to work for them, send them an article about something that matters to their business. Provide something to them, introduce them to someone that may help them. Do a few things, build a goodwill, and at the point that you actually may say, listen, there's a job on your team, I want to have a conversation, they've associated all of these positive things with your name, and now that conversation is going to be way easier walking in with a positive aura around you. And I think, to me, that's important. A lot of times, I do a lot of mentorship here as one of the only women of color in leadership. The mentorship relationships that are most valuable are the ones where I'm walking away learning just as much as the person who is next to me. There are some people that only come when they have a problem, happy to help them, but it's different, right? So I'd say that's how I would look at it.
And that was the next thing I was going to ask, is how do you get mentorship outside of your manager, but maybe your manager's manager or even someone on the C-level?
So one of the things that I always believe that you should have is a mentor, an advocate, and somebody and a group of people that I call feed forward. So we all get feedback, but I look for feed forward. So an advocate is somebody who's in the room when promotions and raises and bonuses are discussed. You need to know in your company who's in that room And one of those people needs to be your advocate. It's not the person you go to that says, how do I write this email? It's not the person you go to when you're in problem, you're in trouble. It is the person that you update or your manager updates about what you're doing well. It's somebody you brag to. It's somebody you share your successes with. It's somebody you might challenge about something that's going on. It's somebody you share an article with. You have to know who's in the room when they're voting on money and promotions. Otherwise, you won't get there. So make sure you know that. If you know that and you're with a company and you keep getting passed over, unless you want to spend all your time pounding your head on the wall, you're in the wrong company. If you're in the right company and they believe in promoting people who are successful, that's what you want to do. You want to mentor somebody who looks like you at one of your intersectionalities. Somebody who's a woman, someone a person of color, somebody who you can go to just about professionalism. And then the other one where I talk about feed forward is you want somebody that you can ask for feed forward about what's in the future. And the way that I would ask is if I asked you guys, I'm a sales trainer, if I said to here, if I gave you a magic wand and you could pick any topic to be trained about, what would you be trained about? Somebody tell us something. Just yell something out. What would you pick? But what about sales? What would you like to learn about sales? How to ask powerful questions. How to ask powerful questions. Somebody else. What else? Building your team. Building your team. One other person. Overcoming objections. You know what you guys just did? You gave me my next 3 topics for my feed forward for my blog, for my feed forward for my topics. Yeah. Chantel's feed forward for her next sessions. I didn't come to you guys and say, oh, I struggle with writing my blog. Oh, I struggle with finding topics. But I came to you and said, if you guys were going to write a blog, if you guys wanted a topic, what would you use? So if you're writing an email to a CEO, you don't go in and go, oh, I'm struggling with writing a topic to a CEO and have someone give you feedback. What you say is, hey, if you were going to write an email to CEO of AT&T, what would you say? If you say that to 10 people, they have now given you feed forward. And feed forward will always give you your answer if you go to your peers or go to the best seller in your company. It doesn't matter what they look like. Go to the best seller in your company and ask them for feed forward. Don't tell them why yours. Don't put yourself down. Don't tell them what you're struggling with. Just ask their advice.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So, an advocate, get you promoted. And you'll notice I talk in threes. And the reason why, you guys know why I talk in threes? What'd you say? You can remember 3, but women use 20,000 words in a day. Do you know how many words of guys in business use in a day? 10,000, 7,000 words. So when I am sitting in the C-suite, if I don't say there are 3 things I want to tell you, boom, 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 guys, stop listening. So learn to be succinct, learn to be concise, and learn to try to think and talk in threes. And they will wait for the threes and they will hear you. You ever come up with an idea and then they really didn't hear you and somebody else repeats it? You know why they repeat it? It's not because they disrespect you. It's not because they don't value you. It's because they didn't hear you. Mm-hmm. Because we use too many words. We love to tell stories. It makes us connected. It makes us feel good. We're women. We love doing that. You want to be in the C-suite? You want to be an executive? This is succinct. Tell us stories, and the only emotion you're allowed to show is passion. We'll talk about angry black women later.
Yeah. How am I doing on time? Do you have the time? Anyone have the time? 8:45. Okay, 15 minutes. So I'm going to ask that question, and then I'm going to leave 10 minutes for questions if anyone in the room has any questions for these panelists. Yes, angry black women syndrome. How do you sell passionately without coming across as aggressive or overbearing? And have you experienced this before? Or to your point, being succinct is a great way to kind of say what you need. But what are some other tips or tricks? Or are you still dealing with this issue even for being in the game for so long?
So I use the acronym GRIP, G-R-I-P, and the first G stands for ground yourself. As women, we are emotional. If you feel angry, if you feel hurt, if you feel embarrassed, if you do not acknowledge that, you are not being authentic to yourself. The first way I do that is take my finger and I squeeze. I have sat in rooms and squeezed my finger so hard that I thought it was going to bleed You take this finger and put it in your lap and you squeeze. You let that anger, that frustration, that fear, that hurt zip around in here. Your anger can only last 60 seconds on the outside. Number two, if you need time, say, tell me more about that, or say that in a different way. If somebody has insulted you, somebody has said something that upset you, if you say that in a different way and you squeeze your finger, it gives you a second to ground yourself. The only emotion women are allowed to show in business is passion. You get that anger grounded, you acknowledge that you're anger, and then GRIP stands for respond with intention and passion. Think about what you want to say. Think about the threes. Do it with intention and do it with passion, like I'm speaking here today. And put that anger and that hurt and that embarrassment right here. And you can take this and put it in your lap. Can anybody see my hand bleeding on my lap when I am so angry? Can anybody see that I am embarrassed? Can anybody see that I'm so excited that I just won that big deal that I want to jump up and down and scream and yell? Women are not allowed to do that in corporate America. Not in the C-suite. Not if you have a VP after your name. You have to learn to be succinct, speak with intention, and passion is okay. So, GRIP, ground yourself. Respond with intention and passion.
Thank you. Do you have any other examples of ways how maybe on the inverse you found yourself isolated or feeling ostracized for being a person of color in the room?
So two pieces. So one, as a mentor here, although I'm Latina and Indian, a lot of Black women will come to me because, again, there's not many of us. And I'm trying to, one of the things I see consistently is that I'm hearing from the women that this is happening, right? Like, and I have to control myself and do this as a manager because I don't want to vent with them. I want to help them out of that position of pain and move them to a position of power. And it's hard. What I would say is I think that when you're the only person in the room, and this is more not with your clients, but like with your peers and your manager, because that in some ways can be even harder. When you're the only one, it's easy to want to isolate yourself, right? Everyone's going out to do something. You're the only one. They're going to be talking about things that you can't relate to. It's not actually fun sometimes. I go to the manager meeting every August. There are 110 managers there. There are 3 people of color, including me. And I know, and I've said this very openly on stage because, again, I'm on these panels all the time for this topic, that I know for 3 days I have to work on fitting in with everyone else, and I know that almost no one is going to try to fit in with me, and it is exhausting. But if you want to make money, if you want to be successful, if you want to do all of these things, you're going to have to do it. What I would say is find those opportunities, whether it's in a group, whether it's one-on-one, to find your people, even if the people don't look like you. What really helped me here, tech, Amex is way more diverse than tech. I came here, I was happy, everyone's bouncing off the walls, loving to be here, and I kept looking around going, what did I do? I have never worked in a place with less people of color in my life, especially at my level. And I was, as happy as everyone was, it almost made me feel more isolated because I wasn't mirroring that emotion at all. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to last. And what I started to do is build allyship with my best friend here is a white guy who is so curious about me. And I don't want to call him woke because I know it's like overused. That term. He's just curious. He'll say to me, Lisa, is that true? I heard someone say this. Can you like share your opinion? And just that dialogue helps me feel so safe when I'm in those settings. I can look at him and I can feel better, even though I still feel as uncomfortable. And I would say is like, don't shy away from those things because especially with your manager, you need to show that you can get along with everyone, that you can be part of the team. And the reality is when you look different, the biases that people may or may not have looking at you already are there before you even open your mouth. So I would say look at those ways how you can build yourself up and make those connections so that isolation is less. And I think the other piece is self-care, which I know was one of your questions later. Like there are times where I literally on 32nd Street in Koreatown, there's a massage place. I have left the office to go over there and get a quick massage because I'm like, I'm just feeling like I can't do this. And when I go home, it's my next job of being a mom and a wife. So I'm going from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day, essentially for other people, because as a manager, that's what it's about. Find those moments. If you realize that you're at a brink, like take that moment to pause and do something for yourself that's just for you. And I think it's perfectly okay to be selfish. And for anyone who is a mom, sometimes we feel guilty when we're traveling. We feel guilty when we're not. I tell my son too, like I was like, listen, I'm going to go do such and such. And like, this is why I'm able to do these other things with you, because I need some time for me. And I think it also teaches him healthy boundaries. It teaches him hopefully who he's going to model when he meets somebody someday, and understanding and respecting whoever that person is.
I actually do want to ask about self-care and burnout, because sales is one of those industries where it's going, 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 new quarter, new month, new half. How do you manage burnout? So massage in the middle of the day, yes, sounds great. Sherilyn and Adrian, what are some ways to combat that?
So, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I walk. I walk and I pray, and I have to get my mentals together, because on the international side, my direct report, she's in Hawaii. So the time difference is so vast. So a lot of times I'm an early bird, so I'll get up early and I'll be working throughout the day, and then like around 1, 2 o'clock, that's when she's up. So then sometimes we're taking it to like 10, especially if we have a big meeting, so she knows I'll say, okay, I need a minute, and I'll just go and I'll do a power walk and pray and release and get my thoughts together, and then I come back.
Does that help you when you like maybe have a bad month to just?
Oh my God, when I have a bad month, it's a bad month.
Yeah.
So far, thank God, it's been good,
Yeah.
sales wise. But when it's bad, I really need to walk and be by myself. So my family understands, just you got to give me some time.
Yeah.
And I'll take it, even if they, like hovering over me. I was like, I need a minute. No matter how cold it is, I'll just go and take a walk.
Yeah.
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 So, again, 3 things on self-care. One is sleep. There's lots and lots of studies that talk about Black women and how we are dying from common illnesses. We're dying from heart disease, we're dying from childbirth. We have more hypertension. There's been a lot of recent studies out about sleep. You have to get 8 hours of sleep. You have to figure out how to get sleep. So as Black women, you have to sleep. Number 2, I had a doctor years ago tell me you have to have a life sport. You have to make a commitment, something that you're going to do for the life. I used to be a marathon runner. I used to run long distance. And so my doctor said I was going to pay for all of his vacations, but we do both my hips and my knees. I then became a cyclist. Now I ride 20 to 25 miles after work in the evening. I ride 30 to 50 miles on the weekend. Having fun. I ride with a bunch of about 600 African American women. It's called the Divas. So find your life sport and run, ride, yoga, swim. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Find a life sport and do it. I don't know if you guys have read Michelle's book. I'm sure most of you have. What did Barack do before he would come home? Remember? Go to the gym. Okay? He would go to the gym. And so we have to make ourselves a priority. So sleep, have a life sport, and eat well. If you do those 3 things, I'm plant-based now. However, if I go to Los Angeles, I'm going to go to In-N-Out Burger. I am not a vegan, not a vegetarian. I'm plant-based by choice. Nothing but plants in my house. When my children come to the house, we cook plants. I know it helps me stay healthy. But I had a hypertensive crisis because I was holding in at work, and I stopped running, and I stopped cycling, and I was traveling, and I wasn't sleeping. And anybody knows what hypertensive crisis is, you're going to have a stroke, and you're going to die. And that's where I was. And so every once in a while, we have those reality checks. If you do those 3 things, sleep, make better choices with your food, and have a life sport, you can balance the rest of it. You can go out there and give, but make sleep a priority.
Thanks. That's really good advice. I'm trying a life sport. Hopefully it works out. Cycling is really fun. I actually really like it. So yeah, the cyclists in the room. I want to ask one last question, and then I want to open up to questions from the audience. So I know everyone here has a passion project, something that they're pouring into on the side. Thankfully, with sales, you kind of make your own paycheck, right? And you work really hard. You're able to not just succeed financially, but also with your own confidence too. And I love the fact that all of you dynamic powerhouse women are able to give back. So really quickly, can you tell us about what you're giving back to the community? How are you helping other women of color with sales or in any capacity? And then we'll open up for questions.
Sure. So I mentioned it when I introduced myself. I'm responsible for being the business liaison for diversity and inclusion efforts here. One of the reasons why I did it, honestly, is that the first one, I care, obviously. I'm a person of color. My husband's Black. My child's triracial. Like, I care, right? My whole family. My whole family. I just made that up, guys. So I have to acknowledge both my parents. I'm not. So I used to get mad, right? I used to get mad that I was the only one. I used to get mad I was picked for every panel. I did it, but I was like, why don't we hire some more people? Why is it only me? And I switched my mindset and said, I have tremendous power in being one of the only one.
Yeah.
I get to say things that other people can't say because people are coming to me. I know I'm a focus group of one. I know that my experience is not everyone's experience. But if I can be the conduit for change, why not take it? And I've embraced it. And once I shifted and said, wow, like I'm getting in front of some really senior people here. Mm-hmm. Because I'm one of the only ones, and they need me. Like it's not a pity project. It's not like I used to joke when I got hired, like they check 2 boxes because like woman, person of color, like But the reality is, I'm delivering. I'm adding value to the company. But I had to switch my mindset around that. I think the other piece is the way I'm able to do it, which I think was part of your question, is I have to excel at my core job, right? Like my team hits their number, I would say almost every single quarter. I have very high ratings from my team in terms of like my manager effectiveness. If I wasn't doing that, I wouldn't be able to do all this other stuff, right? They'd say, Lisa, stop with the passion stuff. Stop with the diversity stuff. You need to hit your number. I'm hired to hit my number and have my team excel. That being said, all the work on diversity inclusion, the mentorship pod, all of these other things I'm doing are what fuels me. So those days when I'm angry and I may have to do this under the table, it helps me because it helps balance out those moments. And so for me, it is part of self-care as well, because I feel like I'm contributing in a way. And I always think about anyone on my team, anyone I interact with, that in 10 years, and they say, name someone who helped you in your life. I want to be one of the people on the list that helped transform that person. And if you have that long-term view with people, your conversations are very different than the sales conversation, which is often quarter, half year, and they're very short-term. And so for me, that I think it's worked. I think the company sees value in it. But again, it started with me, excelling at my core job.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely important to excel at your core job, because if you can't excel on your day-to-day, on what gets you that paycheck, you can't do anything else. So at Unilever, I'm one of the leads for Black Excellence at Unilever, and under that umbrella, we created different like leadership development for youth. So right now with 11th and 12th graders, and we bring them into Unilever and we show them what it's like in corporate America. We just had a session with Inglewood marketeers in that school. We had marketeers from Unilever, just have a session with them on what it's like to have a marketing career. So my passion is really giving back to our students. Primarily we see more girls than boys, but we're trying to pull from both, and we go into Essex County, so we'll go into Passaic, we'll go into Newark, certain parts of Inglewood, and people think Inglewood, like affluent, but there's a lot of homeless people in Inglewood. Mm-hmm. So we try to target the undeserved, just to show them that, hey, this is where you can be. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing about that is we got an email from one of the students from last year, and she said that if it wasn't for you guys, she wouldn't be going to college. So now she's in college. She sent us a picture of her, just pretty. And just to know that, like you're making a difference in someone else's life. And to know that this is our generation. These students are coming up. What do we want them to be? We want them to be better than we are. We want them to run the world. So that's that's where my passion is. So anytime I have that opportunity to dig in and go into the high schools and challenge the students, say, what do you want to do? You know, I know Michelle Obama says she hates that. What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? But what do you want to be when you grow up? You know? And I still ask myself that, because as much as I love sales and I love the international part, I love helping my young individuals. I want to set them up for success, you know.
Mm.
But one thing I do want to say, that networking is key. Your network needs to be strong and it needs to be powerful. I used to network every day, straight across. So all my peers, everybody knew me. But who's going to help me get to that next level? So I met with Mita one day. We sat and had coffee, and she started introducing me to VP of HR. So now he's my sponsor. So I could go to him and say, look, Mike, I'm tired of international. I want to go over to the U.S. So he says, okay, Adrian, just do a shadow someone. So I shadow someone. I don't like U.S. sale. I love international. International is powerful, and you know, you have so many open spaces, all that white space that you're trying to get in to get my product in. So, but I did have the opportunity, but I'll never have the opportunity if I don't network. So I network up. I introduced my VP to other people. Oh, you know her? I was like, yeah. So they're like, oh, Adrian's the governor. So yeah, but my passion is young ones. So
Thank you.
So, three things. The first, yeah, I always think in threes. I learned it from Toastmasters. I don't know if Toastmasters are around. We do table topics. The best way to do table topics is threes. And so the first one is, when I was a working mom in sales, I did sales and mom, period. I didn't mentor. I didn't do special projects. I didn't network. I didn't do all the wonderful things that these women do. I just couldn't figure out how to do. I couldn't get any more out of my day. I wanted to be an incredible mom, and I claim my accomplishment. Just like Adrienne, I have two amazing daughters. One of them is here today. And I also was an incredible salesperson. I took a $53 million account and grew my book of business to over $140 million. That's the type of salesperson I was. I didn't have time to do all the wonderful things. So I didn't do it when I was a seller and a mom. Number two, I'm a reader. And once I learned, the best way to learn something is to teach it. So I would teach it to my peers. I would teach it to my team. I would do lunch and learns. I would just set up, I'm going to do a lunch and learn, and I would just come in and teach something because that's how I learned it. That's how I got into sales training, is I learned that if I need to learn something, I'm going to teach it. And the third item is, if you go to my website, I have a blog. I just have 2 posts up, and one of them is about how not to be invisible. I went to a LinkedIn seminar, and you do the checklist, and you get a score and a rating, and I rated, after 40 years in my career, I was invisible. Okay? I wanted to cry. Talk about sitting there with my finger, I was invisible. And I talk about that journey in my blog, about what I do, and you know what I teach now? I teach social selling. I teach how to use LinkedIn. I teach how to use Twitter. You know why I teach it?
Learn it.
That's right. It is one of my workshops. I can now tell you how to do that. So if you want to know about my journey, go to SherilynCastleman.com. I talk about my workshops there. This event is here. I'm going to be doing some more events and workshops. I'm in D.C., but I travel all over. Once again, one more plug is SherilynCastleman.com. I have several books that I'm working on. But know what's important. You can't do everything. And I'm going to give you permission. It is okay not to do everything wonderful if you can't.
Yeah.
If you're raising your kids and you're an incredible seller, because those are 2 really important things, you can wait. My kids are grown now. I mentor, I coach, I teach, I donate. I got on the train this morning at 2 a.m. and came up here for this workshop. my kids are grown. I don't have to get them up and off to school. And so I can do this now. I couldn't do that when they were babies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
because they were my priority.
It's really good to kind of hear sales professionals be a well-rounded woman and all the things that you're juggling and all the things that you have to do when you have the time to do it, especially as you think about where you're going to be in the next 10 or 15 years. So thank you so much for all of that and for sharing and being so vulnerable. So let's give our panelists a round of applause. You guys are awesome.
Nice job. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for the panelists? We can take about 2 or 3, and then we'll pause for more food and networking. Yes.
How do you remain yourself being the only person in the room? How do you but also
So the question was, how do you remain authentic to yourself when you're the only person of color in the room?
So for me, being authentic is acknowledging those feelings, allowing myself to say, God, that was embarrassing. That was hard. That comment hurt my feelings. Not out loud, just acknowledging it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for me. Being able to say that, also being okay with I don't have to correct everybody. I walked in the building this morning, honest to goodness, stopped at the security desk, and I said, oh, I'm going to LinkedIn. And he says, oh, are you going to the kitchen? And I said, I beg your pardon. And he goes, are you going? Yeah, I didn't understand either. And I said, I'm going to LinkedIn. And he says, are you going to work in their kitchen? Now, I was dressed just like this, okay, walked up to the desk downstairs, and I was like, okay, confidence and humility. Thank you, God. Okay, we'll do this again. I'm going to LinkedIn. I think they're on the 3rd or 22nd floor, and I'm not going to work in the kitchen. I didn't school them. I didn't tell them. I didn't, that is just the reality. I am my authentic self. I am who I am. I had some people edit some of the blogs I've written. I've written a lot. I just haven't posted them. And when you read on my post, you'll understand why, because I'm scared to death. But they said, well, Sherilyn, you have to talk to your sisters. You don't talk to people. You're not. And I'm like, this is who I am. Okay? This is who I am. I am. You don't like it? This is it. And so I'm the same way. And so I had a friend who's an attorney, and she has a beautiful afro. And somebody says, how do you do that? And she goes, when you're a badass, you can do whatever you want. So be a badass. Yeah. Be so good that they can't ignore you. Be so good that it doesn't matter. Then you can be your authentic self. Mm-hmm. But until you become badass at what you're doing, you may struggle with it. Mm. So be so good. And that's one of my passions is I want people that I work with to be so good. Nobody can ignore you.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So it's hard to follow you, but I'm just going to add a little bit from my own experience. So as I mentioned before, if you were to look at the person I was in my 20s, it was a hot mess, right? Like I had not done work on myself. I was carrying a lot of insecurities. I was showing them to the world. I'm not plugging Landmark Education, but I happen to go through a program called Landmark Education. In that process, it teaches you this concept of authenticity. And one of the questions it asks is like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And if you can handle that worst thing, go for it. And so it's not to be impulsive, it's not to be careless, but I think often, our own minds are what's keeping us in place, right? It's what's holding us back. And so for me, a lot of times somebody will say something. I mean, I'm very sorry you had that experience to start, but I'm not shocked, sadly. People will say things like, there was somebody here and I was talking to him about he's a white guy, and I was talking to him about my nervousness of going to the sales meeting because I knew it was going to be one of the people of color and how exhausting it was going to be. And his response was like, I don't think you should feel that way because like no one sees you like that. And so it was like, pause, right? Because I recognize the way I speak and I'm bubbly and blah, blah, blah. Like I make people very comfortable and I get it. But I'm like, that's actually not what I was saying. So I paused. And I was very uncomfortable with the fact that I paused, right? Because sometimes silence is like agreeing with the statement. Yeah. And so I waited 2 days and I went back and I said, hey, I just want to explain something about that. To you, it probably meant nothing. And you probably thought you were helping me, making me feel better. But this is what it felt like to me. What it felt like to me is being a minority is bad. and therefore I should be complimented that you don't see me as one.
Right.
And that actually is not okay. And I said, it's similar if I said, I don't see you as a man. And he's like, you know. And I said, no, seriously, like if you were walking into a room with a bunch of women and they said, oh, Nick, you'll fit right in, I don't see you as a man. You would be insulted. And I said, me being a woman of color is one of many parts of me, and I carry it all the time, even if I'm not consciously thinking about it every single minute. But I did it in a calm way, but I was absolutely honest. I was absolutely authentic, and I think it created a future conversation where we actually have conversations like this all the time. So I was authentic, but I used common sense to not like go off in that moment.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of a pause. That's my.
But
Yeah.
your pause is 2 days, and it's okay. Your pause can be 2 days, seconds, it can be a half hour. And the other thing that I love that Lisa said is Lisa keeps talking about safe. She creates a safe space. You want to create safe spaces at work where you can have those conversations.
So we can take maybe one more question. Anyone else? Yes.
So you guys spoke about being very. How would you manage the situation where you're not really getting feedback from your director? So, of course, with a manager, you want to learn what are the areas where you're weak. This person's supposed to help you. So how can you navigate that?
So here's a comment I make. I say it to my husband.
Thanks.
I say it to my kids. And I say it at work. Okay? You got it? Okay. Write this down. All right. What I say to them is, what's your first name?
Right.
Ooh, say it again.
Right.
Sari? Yeah. I would say, Sari, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank me as a public speaker? Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank me as a mom? As a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rank me as, what is your job title? As an account director. You don't care what the number is. The next question you ask is, what do I need to do to be a 10 in your eyes? Mm-hmm. And you write. I don't care if they say stand on your head for 10 hours. You say, okay, thank you, what else? I don't care if they say take your clothes off and run down the street. You say, okay, what else? And you write it down. If you go and ask that question of 5 to 10 people, do you know what's going to happen? You're going to know where your gaps are. Mm-hmm. And here's what I say. If one person says you're a horse, they're an idiot. If 3 people say you're a horse, it's a conspiracy. But if 5 or 6 people say you're a horse, you know what you need to buy? A what? A saddle. Okay? And the reason why I say that is because if 6 people say to you that you are angry, that you are aggressive, that you are intimidating, that you apologize too much, that you don't have a confidence, you know what gap that is. And as your manager, you should go to your manager at least once a quarter and say to them, Jaylyn, I know her name for a reason, on a scale of 1 to 10, because I call her, and I say, Jaylyn, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate mommy? And Jaylyn says, you're a 7. I don't care what that number is. I said, what do I need to do to be a 10 in your eyes? Just say, call me more often. Take me out to lunch once a week. Whatever she needs. Have that conversation. And it goes back to what Lisa said. You know exactly what they need. You know exactly what your manager wants. You keep asking that, then ask your manager's manager what that. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate me as a potential sales leader? You're a 2. You don't care. What do I need to do to be a 10 in your eyes? Ask your kids that question. Ask your partner that question. Ask your mom that question. And you get your gaps. But remember what I said. You're going to ask somebody who's going to tell you that you're a horse. Dismiss it. There are going to be conspiracies. Dismiss that. Listen to what 6 or 7 or 8 people say.
And I usually talk to my manager once a week. There's no blind side with me. I give her open-ended questions, and we now have that direct relationship where I tell her what I need. She tells me what she needs. But, I mean, like, if you don't ask the question, you'll never know. That's why I always say that song, closed mouths don't get fed. Mm-hmm. I had a closed mouth for a long time, and I was passed over for so many different promotions. But then I said, you know what? Let me start opening up my mouth and asking what I need. Where do you see me? How can I get there? You know, but you have to ask the open-ended questions so you could get a direct answer. Because if you don't get the direct answer, just like she said, how am I doing? Oh, you're doing okay. But that's not giving me anything. I always tell my manager, my director, my VP, give me some constructive feedback. Because if you don't give me a constructive feedback, I don't know where I'm going and how to grow. And be very clear on where you want to go. Because I tell them right now, I want to be VP.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something that lots of studies say men come in the job, and most men, and they repeat it over and over again. I want that job. I want that job. We don't do that. And so when they get in the room, they start about promotions and raises. They're like, Mike might leave because he says he wants manager job. And Tracy's been in the job for a while. She seems content that job. Anybody ever heard her say she wants a manager job? They give Mike the job. You may have just outperformed him twice as much, but Mike got the job. So you don't have to be arrogant. You don't have to be, abrasive. But let people know the job you want, the career you want, where you're going, what you want to do. And if you're a manager, teach your team members how to ask you that question. I tell my team, I said, every single person on my team, no matter how big my team is, should be asking me that question regularly. And it becomes a joke. They're like, okay, Cheryl, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate me as a, and I tell them. And the other thing that I do for training and coaching purposes is I use well and better. Every single time I go with my team in front of a client, at the end of it, we come out and I say, what did you do well? And then I tell them what they did well and what could you have done better. And I tell them what they could have done better. Every time I go into a meeting, higher up, team member, colleague, I say to them, just like when we end here today, I'm going to say to Adrian, what did I do well today and what could I have done better? I'm going to say that to Chantel, what did I do well and what could I have done better? I'm constantly improving.